So we've just hit the top of the hour. Again, welcome to those of you who've already been signed in. And my name again is Melainie Rogers. I'm the founder and CEO here at Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Centre. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to part one of our Eating Disorder 101 series. And today we'll be speaking all about binge eating disorder, which, by the way, is the most common eating disorder, but also so very little is known about it. And today's presentation will be fairly informal in the sense of I'll take you through some of the science, some of the research, but hopefully in a forum that makes it somewhat easy to take in, so we don't overwhelm you with lots of hard science and such, but really getting to the core about what is binge eating disorder, how does it differ to compulsive overeating, for example, or emotional eating, and also can you get treatment for it, and if so, how do you treat it? And so I'll be walking you through treatment that we do here at Balance. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into our presentation today. We'll be finishing up in approximately 50 minutes or so. We have our Q&A box and also our comment chat box. So please feel free to use those throughout today's presentation, and I will be able to hopefully get through some of your questions as we go along. Love it when people are using the chat box, makes things more interactive. So please feel free to do so. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So as I mentioned, we've got this thing called binge eating disorder, which is a full diagnosable eating disorder. But what is it and how does it differ to compulsive eating or emotional eating, and certainly even normal eating? And so here I'm trying to suggest the idea that it's a spectrum, and that we go from normal eating, as seen here on the left-hand side, all the way through emotional eating, compulsive eating to binge eating disorder. And the difference between those types of behaviors is really one of volume, so more volume at each setting, and more distress for the person who is overeating or compulsive overeating. So if you keep those as your two main differentiators, is the volume higher and is there more distress? And the greater those two components, the more this is leaning towards a full-blown eating disorder. Having said that, most people fall around the area here of emotional and compulsive eating. Not many people actually meet full-blown criteria for a binge eating disorder, but many, many, many people fall in this middle area here. So let's talk a second about prevalence. I touched upon it just a little earlier. As you can see here with this triangle, what I'm attempting to indicate there is that the base of the triangle is actually where the greater prevalence is. And you'll see here that binge eating disorder, in fact, has the greatest prevalence of the three main eating disorders: anorexia, which I think most people know about, bulimia, which is where people may overeat, but then they may vomit. And then binge eating disorder, which is overeating large quantities of food without any purging or vomiting or overexercising, and a lot of distress. And so you may be surprised to know that 8 to 10% of the total population at some point in their lifetime will develop an eating disorder. That's up to 30 million Americans. For the longest time, eating disorders have been thought to be very, very rare, but we are finding now that in fact, they're far more common than we ever imagined. And they also are far more dangerous than perhaps the average person knows, whereby eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of any mental illness, second only to the opioid crisis, which is saying something. So prior to the opioid crisis, eating disorders actually, unfortunately, were at number one as having the highest mortality. So what we mean by that is they're much more prevalent than we knew, and they're really dangerous, which means that getting treatment is really, really essential. So on that theme of population prevalence, I think that this whole iceberg image captures what we're talking about. Eating disorders at 10% of the population is really the tip of the iceberg, though, because, as I mentioned, there's a lot of disordered eating going on for people, such as restricting, but not quite full-blown anorexia, such as overeating and purging occasionally, but not full-blown bulimia. And the same with binge eating disorder, with emotional eating, compulsive eating, but not quite full-blown binge eating disorder. And those behaviors make up the bulk of this disordered eating, which is, what's below the surface there in the iceberg. And in fact, we now have a term that has normalized disordered eating, and it's called normative discontent, meaning that we're so used to dieting or these kinds of food behaviors that we don't even realize that they're disordered and that they're actually really, really unhealthy, even though we are perhaps told that some of them at least are supposedly healthy and good for us. So normative discontent, a lot of disordered eating going on in the population, and with 10% of the population struggling with full-blown eating disorders. So that spectrum arrow that I had on the slides earlier, I'm going to walk you through this slide, so don't be too overwhelmed. But I want to walk you through some real examples so that you can really understand the difference here. So in the green on the left-hand side, we have what's the volume of the food that's being eaten, and then how frequently might you be eating that volume of food? Are you hungry when you eat it? Are you feeling emotional when you're eating? Are you full when you eat? And what level of fullness? And is there distress for you when you're doing that type of eating? So let's start with the classic meal, which is the first column there on the left in purple, Thanksgiving. Classic large meal for most Americans. We start out with, yes, it is a large volume. There are many, many courses and many, many different dishes. And you have to, of course, finish up with your pumpkin pie or apple pie or cherry pie or whatever your favorite is. Frequency, it's once a year. Are you hungry? Usually most people are very hungry when they sit down to Thanksgiving. Are you emotional? Maybe, but usually it's a happy occasion. So we're not eating out of emotion. Fullness, usually very full at the end of that meal. Is there any distress? Maybe for some people, because they're like, oh no, I ate too much. But generally speaking, it is a fun and enjoyable meal. I'm using generalizations here. So then EE, emotional eating. How is that different? Okay, what's the volume? Usually small up to large. For example, I'm feeling emotional. I'll have some cookies. That'll make me feel better. Or I'll have some Doritos. They'll make me feel better. What's the frequency? It could happen once a month. It could happen once a week. Are you hungry? Usually with emotional eating, you're not hungry. You're just looking for something. So it's not usually hungry, or it's the acronym HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And tired, I think a lot of people super relate to that, as well as lonely. During the COVID pandemic, I think a lot of extra emotional eating going on. So the emotional, therefore, we're talking about probably HALT. Moderate fullness, because if you have, a few extra cookies, if you have an extra serving of Doritos, maybe not terribly full. And distress, therefore, is kind of low. You're trying to soothe yourself here. Let's go to compulsive eating then, the third column. Again, the volume could be small to large. It's low frequency binging is usually what it is. It feels very compulsive, which means it feels a little bit out of control. Their hunger is there's not necessarily hunger here. There can be, but again, it has a little bit more of an emotional basis to it, hence hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Fullness is a little bit higher here, moderate to high. And distress, there's more distress because, again, it feels compulsive. It feels like I can't really stop. The food is calling out my name. I can't wait to start eating and just inhale it. So then we've got binge eating disorder, which is pretty much some of the same of compulsive eating, but larger quantities, more rapid eating, and greater distress. So let's walk it through there. We've got large volume. It's happening more frequently, at least once a week, 3 times a month is meets diagnosable codes here. We've got hunger possibly starting it. We've definitely got emotions involved. Fullness, we end up very, very overly full, sometimes in a little bit of a food coma. And often there's a great deal of distress afterwards. And we'll walk through the cycle in a moment. So hopefully that's not too overwhelming, but it gives you a little bit of a sense of the sequence here and the incremental increase in some of these behaviors. So let's talk about how did eating disorders start? We've got the loaded gun theory, and I apologize for the use of that term, but that's how it's been coined. And the idea is that our genes load the gun, so they make us vulnerable to developing this. This is an inherited illness because we inherit the way that our brain reacts to food, and reacts to food in a way that makes us want to eat and overeat. And then part 2 is there needs to be an environmental trigger that pulls the trigger. So the genetics load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. So what that means is if you are not influenced or don't have the perfect storm in your environment growing up, you may have the genetic vulnerability but never develop an eating disorder. And many people don't, but many people do. So this is the current theory, and it's important to remember we inherit this illness. We don't just decide that we're going to develop binge eating disorder. Our genetics kind of decides that for us, unfortunately. So if you can see here, so we've got this genetic vulnerability, and we know that the environment pulls the trigger, but what are those environmental factors that could make the difference between having, developing this disorder, or even emotional eating and compulsive eating? And so we've got genetic risk at the core, and then like a fan around that, we've got certain factors that we know can set this in motion. From the left-hand side in the green, family. So family dynamics can be very, very helpful or very harmful. And if mum and dad are engaging in their own disordered eating or their own dieting, they can actually also set up an emotional environment that makes it riskier to develop this illness. Society, wow, what can I say there? Social media comes to mind here, and that is a huge influence because it provides a very easy forum to learn about different ways of manipulating food, dieting, but also it is about comparison. And the more that we feel not as good as, not as attractive as, not as thin as others, that can put enormous pressure on people to start dieting. And as you can see here from the bottom in the green, in the orange, that is dieting, we believe, is a gateway behavior that turns on the genetic risk. So these pressures implement an idea of I need to do something, my weight, my body shape not okay, let me start a diet. And if you've got that genetic risk, we believe that it turns on the eating disorder. Cultural, the thin ideal, need I say more? Psychologically, most of our clients have anxiety, depression, and mood disorders. So that high anxiety can certainly make people more at risk. Personality, many of our clients struggle with perfectionism, which is another pressure we put on ourselves, and trauma and PTSD, including things such as being bullied, etc. Now, trauma and PTSD is an interesting thing because we're in the middle of a pandemic at the moment, and we're all being subjected to chronic long-term trauma throughout this pandemic. So as a result, unfortunately, we are seeing a far greater number of people developing full-blown eating disorders or other disordered behaviors that we spoke about earlier. So the world of dieting, as I said, the dieting is the gateway behavior. The world of dieting is all about promises, promises, promises. And for many of our clients, this is what's going on through their head, right? It's about calories and wellness and health, supposedly, fitness and performance and cardio. Lots of promises, not too much actually then playing out as we are led to believe. So the binge restrict cycle, which dieting initiates. So if we start in the top right-hand corner here with restriction. So we think it might be a really good idea to go on a diet. Many times we're told by our doctors to just lose some weight and that'll help us to be healthier. Or I just need to lose 5 or 10 pounds. And so we start restricting. We're eating less than normal and we're eating only certain types of food usually. So we start off with the best of intentions usually at this point. Then we start to struggle. We start to realize that we're feeling a little bit obsessed with food and we're feeling hungry. And the panic can then set in like, oh boy, what do I do now? I'm hungry and I can't stop thinking about food. And so what we know happens is there's a pendulum swing from this restricting over to binge. And here we give in to those cravings, we eat more than usual, and we usually feel very out of control, and hence the distress that goes with those behaviors. And from there, we then go up to complete the cycle into the struggle, where we feel guilty or ashamed, like a failure. We regret the binging and we make a resolution. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to do better, or next Monday I'm going to do better. We start restricting again. And as you can see, this is a well-known cycle. And so if you feel that your willpower has not allowed you to continue to undereat, what I want to say is it's not your fault. Physiologically, you are being set up to go into binge behaviors under this cycle. So it's not that you're doing something wrong. It's the restricting in the first place that is setting you up for this out of control eating. So let's have a look at what that often looks like. When someone is binging, what does their day-to-day food intake look like? And the most common pattern is one where our clients and general people in the population start out in the morning not terribly hungry, especially if they've been binging the night before. So they may eat their first food item by mid-morning. Maybe some people just skip the whole morning and go straight to lunch, have a light lunch to make up for what happened last night, often just a salad, diet soda. So by the time we're getting towards dinner, there's been not a lot of food intake for the day. And the body is saying, this is not okay. The body wants us to eat a certain optimal amount of food each day to keep our body healthy and functioning optimally. All systems on, all systems repairing, all systems functioning beautifully. And so if you don't give the body the calories, i.e. the fuel that it needs to do its job each day, it starts to send signals to the brain, we need to make up those calories. Let's do something here. And so as you see here, for many of our clients, they start off with dinner and then the overeating can often start and it can go well into the night. And net, if you add all of that up, it's approximately the number of calories that the client needs per day, but often it's more than that because the binging leads to out of control eating and eating beyond fullness, which means over consuming more than the body actually needs. Hence, for many of our clients, there's not just stress about the overeating, but there's often distress because there can be an increase in weight over time, and that can lead to doctors starting to tell you, you've got to be careful of diabetes or whatnot. So then health concerns for some people can be a factor, or the fear of health concerns, because we're certainly told that that is what can happen. So let's have a look at what this means. If we look under the hood, physiologically, what's happening in your body when you don't eat all day? And so this is a really basic graph drawing that I've made here just to give you a sense. But what happens is if you start out eating very little throughout the day, by the time you get to the end of the day, as we all know, when we've done it before, you are starving and your blood levels have plummeted. And as I mentioned, the body has a goal of how many calories it needs each day to function at its best. And it's not getting enough calories yet. So the signals from the brain says, let's find food, we need food. And at this stage, the brain is pretty sophisticated and it's saying, no, a salad won't cut it, or steamed chicken or grilled chicken or steamed broccoli is not going to cut it. We need far more calories than that to meet our goal today. So that's where a lot of our clients report the fried chicken looks really good, you know, the double portion of French fries and the smoothie or whatever it may be. High calorie foods that the body needs to take in and wants to take in to get to that minimum. But usually, as I said, what happens in that eating period, because we're feeling a bit out of control, is we overshoot our calorie mark and we end up overfull rather than comfortably full. So what do we do about that? And we'll come back to how and what we do to try to normalize that eating pattern and stop those progressions of, you know, crash spike. So a question for you all, because a lot of our clients or people may be listening to this presentation today, this webinar may say, okay, but I don't think I've really got a big problem. I mean, occasionally it's a problem and occasionally I get upset by it, but I don't think I need treatment. And hopefully that's correct and hopefully you don't. But this is a great question to get a sense of how much is this relationship with food affecting you mentally. So ask yourself this question: how much of your day do you spend thinking about food, calories, body image? And I'd like you to think about how much of your day is spent with these thoughts when you're not distracted. So not distracted with work, not distracted with school, not distracted with some project. If you're left alone with your thoughts, which for many people can be very frightening to consider, how much of your day you're thinking about food, calories, body image. And we actually have research on this. And the first column there, AN, stands for anorexia. Our anorexic clients can be thinking about food, calories, body image more than 100% of the time. And you may ask, how is that possible? There's only 24 hours in a day. And the reality is they are often dreaming about food as well because of that obsessiveness. For bulimia, BN, and binge eating disorder, BED, that can be 75 to 80% of the day is just thinking about calories, food, body image. That's a lot of time. It doesn't leave a lot of time to be thinking about anything else. And what it means is if you've got two channels playing in your head at all times, you've got the eating disorder or disordered eating thoughts about, oh, I had that for breakfast and so I can't eat that, or I need to make sure I do this later, or let me supplement my I don't know, my grilled cheese with a salad or whatever it may be. And then over here, you're trying to do work, do school, do your relationships. Very, very difficult to be in two minds at the same time. DE stands for disordered eating. So this is the compulsive eating, the emotional eating that is not quite at the frequency or volume of full-blown eating, of binge eating disorder, but it's still very problematic for the person experiencing it. And so therefore that person could be thinking about food for 50% of the day and the calories and body image. Very, very distressing. As a comparison, non-eating disorder people or non-disordered eating, people who just get up and they're hungry and they have breakfast and they're full and they forget about food until lunch. Imagine that. Around 15% of their day is spent thinking about food, which leaves a lot of bandwidth for all the other things that are honestly far more important. So that's just to give you a sense. And if you are noticing that, hey, I do spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff, that tells you that this is getting into terrain where it's starting to disrupt your life. So BED behaviors with food, what do we commonly see? And I wonder if any of you may relate to some of these behaviors. So we spoke about eating large quantities of food in a short period of time and feeling distress and out of control. Often done in private or secretly. Often our clients eat very little during the day, as we saw earlier. There are often large food bills as a result, large credit card bills, seamless, etc. High anxiety with having certain foods available, and very black and white relationship with food, like it's good food, it's bad food, or healthy food, unhealthy food. Food choices also hold a moral judgment. For example, I'm a bad person if I eat bad foods, right? I'm bad. And intuitive eating, which is eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full, eating foods that you like to eat and you feel sated by, it's often contradictory to their beliefs, which is, I have to weigh my food, I have to measure my food, I have to count the calories. I can't trust my internal hunger and fullness signals because they'll lie to me. Mental health, there's a high correlation, as I touched upon earlier. Anxiety, at 65% of our clients exhibit anxiety. Depression, very high, almost half of our clients. Impulse control, substance use disorder, and ADHD are all common, what we call co-occurring, which means that a client doesn't just have a binge eating disorder. They usually have these other components as well, which makes it really hard to treat, but not impossible. And that's why good treatment is so necessary. Often have a trauma history. For clients of a higher weight, there can be trauma related to living life in a larger body. And we hear this from our clients all the time. Public comments, remarks, a lot of discrimination, weight stigma is alive and well. And therefore, BED carries the most stigma of all eating disorders. I cannot tell you how many of my clients have said, if I'm going to have an eating disorder, I wish I had anorexia. You know, and I get it, meaning that if I had anorexia and I was under eating, even though a lot of health concerns there as well, at least you may fit in with what society is telling us we should look like. Very sad, though, that we're wishing for a different type of eating disorder. So how do we treat binge eating and disordered eating? So, you know, earlier where we had that graph, which was a crash and spike, right, by not eating throughout the day. What we want to do, what we want to start to do is reestablish those blood sugar levels and balance them out. So it's more of a wave throughout the day. A wave meaning your blood sugars kind of go up a little bit and then they start to come down. You have a meal, they go up a little bit, then they come down, signaling another meal is necessary. And so it's more of this kind of gentle wave, I don't know, a presentation, flow, if you will. Sorry, just forgot my word there. And that helps to prevent those crazy compulsive moments of overeating because you're too hungry, and also ideally not overeating to a point where you're too full. So this is kind of where we want to get our clients back to. And we do that. Our start point is what we call the rule of threes from Marsha Heron, who's a wonderful nutritionist and has a book on this. And it's basically 3 meals each day and up to 3 snacks as needed. And so that's our rule of threes. That's how we start off with breakfast, a little snack, lunch, a little snack, dinner, and possibly a little snack after dinner. Initial reactions from our clients when I say, okay, this is the plan we're going to work towards. They may say, I'm never hungry in the morning, so I'm just not going to be doing that breakfast. Thank you very much. Or they may feel that delaying and avoiding food is good, and therefore I'm virtuous, our core values, right? And therefore I'm being good by avoiding food. And now you're telling me you want me to eat more? That's risky. And so this next point, I'm afraid that once I start eating, I won't be able to stop. I'm out of control. And the next point here, or I'm afraid that if I add in more food, I'll only gain weight faster and people will see that I'm gaining weight. And also, of course, I don't trust you, Melainie. Who are you telling me to do this? And certainly I don't trust myself enough yet to take this big leap of faith, because it does feel like that for our clients, and all very understandable. So let me walk you through the binge eating disorder recovery pathway as I conceptualize it and as we approach things here at Balance. And I know this says BED recovery, but any type of overeating, compulsive eating, emotional eating that we spoke about earlier, will go through these steps as well. So first and foremost, you'll see at the top of the screen here on the left-hand side, we've got this thing called physiological binges. That's just, I'm starving, hungry, I start to eat, and then it gets out of control. And that's what we were referring to earlier with the crash spike piece. That was a physiological binge, meaning you're not eating enough during the day. By the time you get to food, it's really obsessive. Versus emotional binges, which can overlap or can be their own feature, which is, for example, I just had a fight with my mum. I'm not hungry necessarily, but I went to the fridge and I emptied out the fridge, or I ordered in from Seamless, or I had a fight with my boyfriend or girlfriend, or the boss yelled at me, or everyone wants something from me and I'm losing my mind right now, right? So not necessarily hunger-based, and therefore can happen anytime. Emotional binges. So let's pop down to the 6 green boxes at the bottom here, starting off with in the middle on the left-hand side. Our first approach with treating our clients is to legalize all foods. We use the all foods fit model, which I know for many of our clients is like, what? That is really scary. And so we do it step by step. We don't just throw you in the deep end there. But legalizing all foods, taking away the good food, bad food, healthy food, unhealthy food, and just treating food like food, meaning pizza is just the same as a salad, is just the same as sushi, is just the same as a burger and fries. It's just food. So if we legalize all foods, we notice a very curious thing, that the food starts to lose its emotional pull. That idea of, I'm gonna be bad, I'm gonna be deviant, I'm gonna, go and have burgers and fries because it's really naughty. It loses all of that power over you. And then it comes down to, do I even like these Shake Shack burgers and fries? Or maybe these are the best fries ever and these are the ones I'm choosing to eat. So legalizing all foods. And what we do is we have structured eating. So we'll actually work out a customized meal plan for our clients based upon what they like to eat, what their preferences are, and what feels safe initially, as we start to help them reincorporate some of these scarier foods. And I'll get to that in a minute. So we see a reduction in binging because, hey, I can have pizza every day if I want it. It loses some of its allure. We then start to introduce our clients to the concepts around the internal system, hunger, fullness, satiety, and more variety. All right, these are just concepts here. But as we practice them and as the body and the brain get more connected, because most of our clients are very disconnected from their bodies. And so as that system becomes more integrated again, back to where it was or close to when we were babies and kids. This system was working really well, and then it got derailed. So we need to try and get that reconnected. We then can get into trusting that system a little more and start to eat intuitively, i.e., I'm hungry and I'm full, so I'm going to stop now. Attuned eating and mindful eating, which means, you know, if you're eating, I don't know, chocolate, and you have 3 different types of chocolate in front of you, with mindful eating, you're actually tasting it and you can differentiate, yeah, this chocolate, I love it. This chocolate is awful. I can't believe I've been eating that for so long. I'm never going to buy that brand again. And so you really become much more discerning with what you're eating. And when we're more aware of how we're experiencing food and tasting it, we're able to hit the satiety spots, which is what the body wants us to do. And so then there's a greater satiety, which helps towards stopping when you're comfortably full. I know that may sound pie in the sky, but it is an amazing process to watch and see develop in our clients. And then from there, we go towards feeling more confident and more balanced eating. And what that really means is that initially, a lot of our clients may feel like, oh my gosh, I can eat my French fries every single day. I can eat French fries 3 times a day. But what we find starts to happen is the body starts to kind of let you know what it needs in a way. And we do have a biological responsibility to our body for certain nutrients. And so, you know, the idea of, are we eating enough vegetables and fruits and proteins and these other things in addition to our French fries? It's not about calories. It's just about balancing it out. So that the body is getting what it needs optimally and it's functioning optimally. So that's kind of what balanced eating looks like. And the goal there is neutrality with food. And there has been some great research around the fact that this is absolutely achievable. For some of you joining us today, this may sound like, but AA tells us, you know, or Overeaters Anonymous tells us that we can never eat some of those forbidden foods again. But we now have more research that tells us actually it's important that you do start to reintroduce some of those so-called forbidden foods. So let's have a look at this forbidden food or fear food hierarchy, if you will. And so, as I said, we don't just throw our clients into the deep end and say, okay, go for it. Here are all your scary foods. You can eat them anytime. And you feel like you're just binging all the time, out of control. That would not be setting you up for success. So when we start off with a structured food plan with our clients, we start off with, what do you feel are your lower risk binge foods? What can you feel safer with and navigate somewhat okay? And then we get things started from that safer place. And then we slowly introduce some medium risk binge foods. And then eventually we get to higher risk binge foods, level 3. And level 3 binge foods for many clients is, for example, ice cream is a very, very common one. And it's quite amazing for our clients to be able to progress to the point where they can now have ice cream in their freezer at home and feel safe with it. And I'm thinking of one of my clients in particular where that's exactly where she's gotten to, and it's an incredible thing to see. And she's excited and blown away that she's able to do that as well. So that's how we work through those binge foods. And again, this takes time. This doesn't happen overnight. This is a slow, what we call exposure therapy over time. So let's have a look at those steps for reintroducing those so-called forbidden foods. And this is just one way that we do it here at Balance. And I'm using the example of ice cream, a small single serve container. So stage 1, you may actually decide together, I want to try ice cream. Let's do it. So you may eat that together with your nutritionist in your nutrition session. And there's a lot of planning. What flavor? Do you want me, the nutritionist, to buy it? Do you want to buy it and bring it in for us? And then we eat it together. And then stage 2, after that feels okay and safe enough that the client doesn't then leave the session and go and binge, right? It needs to be safe enough that it doesn't trigger more behaviors. When the client feels okay, maybe the client feels confident enough to order ice cream dessert at a restaurant. Finite, single serve, maybe with some support friends around them, and it doesn't trigger them going home and buying ice cream. That is a huge success. Stage 3, the client gets a small single serve and brings it home to enjoy it at home. And then stage 4, maybe the client can get to a point where they're able to buy a pint of their favorite ice cream and then eat it over several days in a very non-compulsive, balanced, neutral way, and just love it. It is possible, but again, stages. And so as I'm moving towards the end of my slides here, neutrality, road to recovery, is really this idea of moving through hunger, fullness, and satiety cues. And as you start to be able to interpret those signals from your body and understand, oh yeah, that's hunger. Oh yeah, I'm full. You start to trust your body again. And as you start to trust your body again, there's a significant reduction in anxiety around eating and anxiety around food. And there's a significant a reduction in anxiety that you might, in trying to do this, you might get out of control and end up overeating and gaining a lot of weight. Again, I'm reporting back what our clients tell us. And so it leads to food neutrality and a trust in your body. So it's quite a remarkable process that is absolutely achievable. And so I'm going to leave us there with some information then about here at Balance. You know, if any of my slides today may have spoken to you, or you're wondering, gosh, you know, I'm not sure, maybe it'd be worth talking to someone, you can always give us a call. I'll give you our contact information in a moment. But I'll just let you know that we are thrilled to be going back in person for our full-time day treatment program next Monday. We'll be back in person with half of our program in person and half virtual. We're going to be doing a hybrid. We also have a weeknight program 3 nights a week, which right now is still fully virtual, and possibly in October or November, we'll be bringing that program back in person as well. We also have a Saturday program. And then we have 1 night a week groups. All of these are virtual right now: food and mood, body image, and an intuitive eating group. And we also have a very, very new LGBTQ group and a men's group. And then if you're looking or thinking maybe one-on-one, maybe I need to see a nutritionist one-on-one, or maybe I need to see a therapist one-on-one, we offer those individual counseling sessions and also meal support to do some of those food exposures. So if any of those appeal to you and you'd like to know some more, you can go online to our website, balancedtx.com/call. And you can actually set up a free 20-minute discovery call with one of my therapists in the admission team, and they can help you get a sense of what might be going on for you. Or you can just give us a call directly on our phone number there, 212-645-6903.